All right, team, welcome back. I hope everyone is doing all right. Today, we're going to be jumping into AP exam rubrics. We have two essays on the AP exam. One is the LEQ, the long essay question, and the other is the DBQ, the document-based question. And so these have some similarities, these essays, and then they have some differences. I told you at the beginning of the school year that I didn't want to overwhelm you with all of the rubrics and information on the AP exam, so we're going to be breaking it down in segments. Today is the segment over our long essay. There are some similarities between these two essays, but there are a lot of clear differences. So I want to make sure the differences between these essays are super apparent to you guys. For the DBQ, you're given sources that you will reference throughout your essay to support your argument. You have 7 sources that College Board chooses, and you'll use those to answer the prompt. This will be similar to what we do in class, where you are given a prompt. You're supposed to reference your sources as evidence by saying something like, this is seen in source 2 when it says blank. However, the difference between the DBQ and the LEQ is you do not have sources for the LEQ. It is all outside evidence. So you will get the prompt, and then you will just answer it from outside knowledge that you've learned throughout the year. So you don't reference sources or videos in the LEQ, but you simply state outside information as facts that you know. We're going to look at the DBQ and the LEQ prompts, and we're going to look at some of the similarities and differences between these prompts and the points that you can earn on the AP exam. So as you can see here, this is the DBQ rubric. The DBQ and the LEQ are both 4 paragraphs. There's the intro paragraph for both, which is made up of the thesis and the context, and there are 3 body paragraphs. So let's jump into how you get these points on the DBQ and the LEQ. The DBQ is worth 7 points. There are 7 different opportunities to gain these points on the document-based question where you have sources. The first point is context, and the context is the background information that you start off with in your intro paragraph. Then you will jump to your thesis, that's your argument and your 3 clear claims. Those 2 make up your intro paragraph. Then you jump into your body paragraphs. When we start to talk about body paragraphs, this is when we get into things like evidence, analysis, and reasoning. And so evidence, you have 3 opportunities for points on the AP exam. The first point is just evidence use, and that means you referenced at least 3 documents and use them as evidence accurately. Remember, don't quote evidence ever. You have to put it in your own words to be getting that first point. The second point is evidence support. This means that you used those documents to actually support an argument in response to the prompt. And you need to do that for at least 6 of the 7 documents. This is a really hard point to get, but it's something that we're all going to feel really equipped for by the end of the year. The third point for evidence is evidence beyond the documents. So like I said, you will have 7 documents for the DBQ, and one point that you can get on the DBQ is using information that's not seen or referenced in the documents. So if you remember something from class or from a video that you watched, and that's not seen in the documents, and it can be something that can further your argument or support your claim, and you can use that in your DBQ to get your third point. The only caveat to that is it has to be really specific evidence to be able to get that outside evidence point. You only have to do that once effectively to get this point. Then if we keep scrolling down, our last 2 points, one is complex understanding. And the complex understanding point is basically your 3rd body paragraph where you show your counter view. So in your thesis, you have 2 claims that support your argument, 1 that shows a counter perspective. Having that 3rd body paragraph and getting to that counterclaim can give you that complex understanding point on the DBQ. The other point is sourcing. And so sourcing on the document-based question is similar to what we did in class last time, where we looked at the identity of the authors of those sources and we said, how does that identity impact the way that this source is written? If you do that for at least 3 documents, then you can get the sourcing point. So as you can see, that adds up to 7 points for the document-based question. That's the one that we have sources with. Now let's scroll down to the long essay question. This is the one that we don't get sources for. We just see the prompt. We have to choose the prompt we're going to answer, and then we have to use all outside information, things that we've remembered from the school year. Similar to the DBQ, it will be 4 paragraphs. Your intro paragraph, which starts with context, then jumps into your thesis, and then you get into your 3 body paragraphs that follow. When it comes to these body paragraphs, evidence looks a little bit different because you're not referencing sources. So to get the first evidence use point, you need to provide specific examples of evidence that is relevant to the topic of the prompt. That just means having at least 3 very specific pieces of outside evidence, things that reference buzzwords or people or specific numbers. Whatever it is, it has to be very specific, and then that can get you the evidence use point. The evidence support point, that's the second evidence point. That means that you're using whatever you said as evidence to actually tie back and support the claim you made. That looks like reasoning. When we talk about claim, evidence, and reasoning, that is your reasoning point. And you have to do that with at least 5 pieces of evidence throughout your essay. To get this one, you just need about 3 examples of evidence use, 5 examples of evidence support throughout your essay to get those. Then if we keep moving on, you can see that this point is a little bit different than the DBQ. You will have what's called a historical reasoning point. That means that you framed your argument around the type of historical thinking skill that the question asked. So if we're comparing 2 empires, then you framed your argument around that and you use comparison language. Things like, this shows that it's similar because blank. Or similarly, in the Aztec Empire, they did blank. By using that language, it signifies to your grader that you're using that historical reasoning skill, and that can get you that point. And then finally, our last point for this is the same as the DBQ. It's the complex understanding point. That means that you got to your 3rd body paragraph, your counter paragraph, and that you're showing an alternative perspective from the original claim that you made. You're showing that you are bringing another viewpoint to the fold. So let's go back to our PowerPoint. And we can see the highlights down here at the bottom in terms of what are the differences. Well, the DBQ is out of 7 points, and the LEQ is out of 6 points. The DBQ has outside evidence point and sourcing point because you have sources. So using outside evidence gets you an additional point, and sourcing those documents gets you that additional point as well. The LEQ does not have either of these categories, but it does have a historical reasoning point, which the DBQ does not. That is, remember, framing your argument around that historical thinking skill, such as comparison or things like causation. And then the DBQ, you need 3 pieces of source evidence, referencing at least 3 sources for use, and you need to support at least 6 sources for the support point. The LEQ is a little bit different. You need 3 pieces of outside information for the use point and 5 pieces of outside evidence that is supported, or you actually show reasoning to tie back to your claim to get that evidence support point. So the prompts could look relatively similar. However, the formatting will be as follows. I'm going to share my screen again so that you guys can see the College Board released prompts. So this is kind of what it will look like on the AP exam. This is a released essay question from the 2018 exam. So you can see here that it gives you the rubric on the first page. It says that you will be answering the document-based question there, and it says you should probably spend about an hour on this. 15 minutes reading the sources and 45 minutes writing. Tells you everything that you need to have in your essay here, the rubric that we just went over, and then it will ask you the question. So for example, this is a question that says evaluate the extent to which railroads affected the process of empire building in Afro-Eurasia between 1860 and 1918. Obviously, we haven't gotten to those dates in class, but you can see that then they list off all of the sources here, all 7 of those sources, and then you will be given a space to write your response. So that's what the DBQ looks like. However, the LEQ looks a little bit different. If we keep scrolling down, you can see that it gives you the rubric. Similarly, it tells you that you should spend about 40 minutes writing, because remember, you don't have to read any sources, so it's just writing. And then it will give you an option on which prompt to respond to. So each of these prompts will usually be from different time periods, and you get to pick whichever prompt you want to answer based off the one that you feel most confident with, whatever you remember the most information from. So let's say I decide to focus in on this one, then I'm saying in this time period, different factors led to the emergence and spread of new religions and belief systems, such as Buddhism, Confucianism, and Christianity. Develop an argument that evaluates how such factors led to the emergence or spread of one or more religions in this time period. And then I would respond to that using all outside information that I've learned throughout the school year. We'll head back to our PowerPoint now. So we're going to do a quick test your knowledge. So based off of this prompt, take about 20 seconds, pause the video, read through this, and think, is this DBQ or LEQ? Whenever you're done, you can unpause the video and we'll go over it together. Great, hopefully you got this right. As you can tell from this body paragraph, this would be a DBQ body paragraph. The hint to me in that was that it says, as shown in document 5. Remember, there's documents on the DBQ, so that's what you reference in a DBQ is those sources, but you don't reference sources in an LEQ. Now let's go on to our next example. Pause the video, come back in about 20 seconds after you've read, and be ready to answer. You can begin. Great, welcome back. Hopefully you got this correct. This will be an LEQ body paragraph because as you can see here, there's no references to sources or videos. Instead, it just says these pieces of evidence as facts. So you can see here, it says in period 2, many new trade routes such as the Silk Road, Trans-Saharan Trade Network, Mediterranean, and Indian Ocean were developed. These trade routes connected different countries all over different areas. Very specific evidence. Along with the use of boats and ships, merchants were able to travel to different countries to sell and buy goods. As they traveled, they brought their religion with them, like items, books, clothes, etc. So when a merchant traveler arrived to their destination, they were able to spread that religion. So that's that specific piece of evidence that shows how that religion was spread to these other cultures through trade. That would be an LEQ because it is not referencing specific sources. So stamp it. Don't reference sources or videos in LEQ essays. We had a lot of people reference in source 2 on LEQs or in this video on their LEQ essays last week. You don't reference that on LEQs, you just state it as evidence that you know. It's all outside evidence on an LEQ, so just state it as fact. So today, like I said, we will be shifting. Now we're going to be focusing on the DBQ or the document-based question. Last week we attempted to write the LEQ and you were not given sources. Today we're going to attempt to write just a thesis for a DBQ and you will be provided those 7 sources. Just like on the AP exam, it will be 7 sources. I know that seems like a lot, but you will learn that that's actually more helpful because you have more evidence to use in your essays. So the prompt that we'll be answering today after you read your sources is evaluate the extent to which long-distance exchange networks impacted regions in Afro-Eurasia similarly from 1200 to 1450. So let's break down that question a little. It asks us to evaluate the extent to which these things were similar. So extent, that means that we have to respond in our thesis as they were similar to a significant extent or to a minimal extent. Do not use they were similar somewhat. That doesn't actually pick a side and it's confusing to your grader, so make your side really clear whatever you're about to argue, significant or minimal. We are looking at how long-distance exchange networks impacted these different regions. So what are long-distance exchange networks? Well, it's what we've been talking about in class, the Silk Road, Indian Ocean trade, and the Trans-Saharan Trade Network. We haven't yet gotten to the Trans-Saharan Trade Network, but you'll see in the documents they're not referenced. So we'll just be focusing in on the Indian Ocean and the Silk Road. We're asking ourselves how those networks impacted regions in Afro-Eurasia. Well, what is Afro-Eurasia? Afro-Eurasia is Africa, Europe, and Asia. So we're looking at how it impacted those regions, and was the impact similar in Africa, Europe, and Asia, or was it different in those different regions? And we're looking specifically at the time period of 1200 to 1450. We know that that is the post-classical era. So make sure you are breaking down those prompts like we just did together for every essay that you write. That will make sure that you're setting yourself up for success on that essay. Tips and tricks for today as you're looking at these documents. You will have the rest of our independent classwork time to read through these documents and fill out your graphic organizer. So you should have open 2 browsers, one of which will be the document set, all 7 of those documents. On another browser, you should have your organizational chart that I gave you to take notes in. You'll only stamp key points in this organizational chart so you can manage your time well. Don't be listing off a ton of information, just stamp the key points here so that you can get through it quickly. Look at sources through the lens of SPICE. This will help you because that's usually how we frame our thesis statements. So look for in these sources what are social, political, cultural, economic impacts that you are seeing in these sources. As you see similarities or differences in these charts when you're filling it out, highlight them as similarities or differences. Maybe highlight similarities in yellow, highlight differences in red, so that when you go back, you can clearly see, how am I going to set up my thesis? Are there a lot of similarities in yellow, or are there a lot of differences in red? Do I want to say they're more similar or more different? That will help you when you're going back to write your thesis. So once you are done reading sources, answer those loop questions at the end, and then we'll come back together to discuss our overarching question and write our thesis together. Hopefully that sounds good. If you're confused, feel free to reach out for questions, or always go back in the video and rewatch something if you were confused or you felt like it went too fast. Good luck today, guys, and I look forward to reading your thesis statement.